coworker Jeff Durkin is in the back. He's the one that helped set this up and brought myself here. I'm the cows for New York and the Northeast and East Coast, I guess. Cows technical specialist for our ruminant team. So NOVUS has, I'll get into it in a second, but NOVUS has a program where we assess, assess lameness among other things on farm to help farmers better run their business and make decisions and so forth. So we'll get into a little bit of that. But just before we start, are you guys all mostly hoof trimmers? Do we have any dairy farmers here, or kind of what's the mix? I like knowing who I'm talking to. Dairy, okay.
Dairy, trimmer.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome. I live just outside Syracuse, so not terribly far from here. But I'm going to spend a few minutes before lunch. I won't keep us too long before lunch. But I'll tell you a little bit about NOVUS and then talk a little bit about our cows program. So how it works, what we do on farm, and then how it helps people make decisions. And then we'll get into a little bit of information about lying time and why that's really important on farms and how that impacts lameness and all the other external factors that come into play when we're talking about lameness. So really an overall, what I want to accomplish is an overall discussion and get your mind going on what we can start doing to be more preventative before the cow gets to the chute with, you know, a lameness score of 4 or 5. So, and then some of the things that we see on our dairies and the information we collect when we're on farm. And then we'll have lunch. But we're a US-based company. We manufacture some products you might recognize, Mintrex, that's manufactured in Arkansas, and then MFP and Lameness in Texas. You might recognize these, may not, but if you have any other questions, you can ask Jeff or I after. I won't spend too much time on this, but that's a little bit about what we sell as a company. On my team, I like I said, cows manager for New York, but focused East Coast. We have an open role in the Midwest, and then my coworker is in California, and she covers the Western United States, and my boss is located in Ontario. So overall, we've done over 2,000 of these assessments in North America, and what that's given us is an entire database of information that we're able to benchmark farms on. So if I do a cows assessment on your herd in New York, you'll be benchmarked against similar herds of your stall base, location, parlor type, cow stage of lactation, all of that, and that helps give you an idea of how you're comparing to your peers when it comes to certain scores and what you're doing management-wise. Oh, and that's kind of interesting. Over about 2 million cows influenced by the program and growing. So the overall assessment, before I get into some of the further information, what we do is we start with a management questionnaire. So that gives us basic farm management information in terms of milk production, components, that's just an example, reproduction. So that as we're looking at some of these cow-based measures, we can look at what the farm's doing and say, okay, our 90+ herds that are making X amount of components are doing X, Y, Z, and that's, you know, that can help benchmark other farms and help people figure out management-wise where do they need to make changes, and helps our recommendations as well. So the cow-based measures we look at are lying time. We score hocks and knees, and then we score for lameness. Today we'll focus mostly on lameness and lying time and how those intersect. We also look at stall design. We do stall measurements, bedding, quality and quantity, stocking density, water space, and assess cow time budget. So we look at what the cow's doing throughout the day while we're there. We also score and record time away from pen. So how long is it taking for her to milk, and how is that impacting everything else that's going on? And then we come back to the farm and give feedback relative to the regional benchmark like I was talking about. And then that hopefully helps the nutritionist and the farm and veterinarian and trimmer as well make some management decisions moving forward. These are the loggers we use. I just wanted to throw this up so you have an idea. When I'm talking about laying time, line time what we're actually using to measure that. So it's a little device that goes on the cow's back leg, and we keep it on for about 4 days, pulls 3 days worth of data, and we do 40 cows throughout the pen that the farm wants to assess randomly. So we don't, if a cow comes in limping, she gets one put on. So we really, if she's in the randomly selected group, I mean. So we really try to get a full picture, randomized of what's going on within that pen that we're assessing on farm. So when we score lameness, it's a little different than what you might be used to with like farm program. It's a little more intense in terms of we have, instead of a 3-scoring system, it's a 5-point score. Biggest things we look for, and I think Gerard touched a little bit on this, but head bob, back arch, joint flexion. Big piece is tracking, so when I score, I stand in a spot where I can watch how a cow is tracking. When we look at lame cows on farm, 4 to 5s, I referenced that earlier, those are going to be your severely lame cows. Those are cows that are either 3-legged for like a 5, or a 4 would be a cow that is very visibly limping and needs to go get attention, right? Where we really like to spend a lot of time talking with our farms is in the prevention category, right? These, I would say, you're behind the ball, they need to be treated, and that's where you talk about treatment plan. But the mildly lame cows is kind of where we want to focus discussion today on overall farm prevention. So these cows, their back might be arched, they've got a steady head carriage, so a little harder to distinguish, but hooves might be tracking, there might be a slightly asymmetric gait, or a slight limp. Most of the time that limp will be categorized as a 4, but as a dairy producer, hoof trimmer, you're able to look at cows and say, she's probably going to become lame within the next few weeks or days, but by the time you put her on a trim list, she might have already progressed to like a 4 or 5. So really figuring out a plan that helps you identify the 3s in your herd and then figure out how to get them treatment faster, or what's happening in their environment that's causing lameness issues. But I do like to spend a lot of time here because oftentimes with farm program or other programs, they're simply detecting your severely lame cows for reasons of marketing milk and so forth. So we'll get into a little bit of risk factors for lameness. So I like using a lot of pictures, but when we're on farm, some of the things we look at and observe: uneven concrete, so areas where cows are going to trip, stumble, areas that might catch more manure, cause slipping, overcrowding, so you can see some cows perching in this picture or just standing and idling. Hoof hygiene, or cows constantly in manure. Eroded concrete, so if there's a lot of stones exposed, I've seen a lot of foot baths that have become eroded in the bottom actually. So when I look at foot baths on farm, I get inside and feel with my boots on the bottom to if there's stones exposed. That's a good example of some of that. Holding area too is a big spot where I've noticed eroded concrete that cows are standing on slightly uneven surfaces and stuff like that. Perching, heat stress, infectious lesions, and then of course feeding management. If you have cows standing at the feed bunk waiting for feed for a period of time, it's going to cause some higher incidence of lameness. So this data is pulled from our own database. So like I was saying, we capture all of the data when we go on farm and then put it in our database. And so this showcases, if you look in the West, these are about lameness averages. The blue bar is moderately lame, so those would be like the 3s. And then the gray bar is severely lame cows, so those are the 4s and 5s, the cows that are limping in your herd or really struggling to get around. In the Northeast, we run about a 30% lameness overall prevalence within our herds, and about a 4%, a little over 4% for severely lame. Midwest, about the same. West is going to be a little less, Pacific Northwest a little less, and same with the South. Southeast is pretty close to a little less than severely lame. And then if we look at our data as well for lameness prevalence, I like this graphic because it shows between freestall, open lot, and tie stall. United States numbers are on this far side, but you can see how we compare to Canada, in Mexico in terms of those numbers. And freestall in the U.S. has the higher incidence of lameness. Just some lameness impacts. You know, you guys know this, but it's a really costly thing on a dairy. And then the median length that a cow is lame is about 5 months. So the impact is huge. Particularly what's interesting is that cows in early lactation are 2 times more likely to become lame. And cows lame before 21 days of milk had the greatest reduction of total milk yield, about 2,000 pounds for that lactation. So it's interesting to think about, right? Because those cows are the ones that are going to be up waiting for feed and trying to feed more frequently than as they're recovering in that fresh period, than, you know, longer in lactation cows are. But also to think about how we're storing dry cows. What's happening in the dry cow area? What does dry cow trimming look like? So it's always an interesting spot to think about is that fresh cow stuff, and I have some data on that later that I'll share. But when we're talking about cows, there's the internal drive for all of the activities they do in a day. They milk, they drink water, they feed, they socialize, and they rest. And those are pretty much all of the things we want our cows to be doing throughout the day. And this is approximately what we want their time budget to look like. 12 to 14 hours of lie time is what industry standards are. Every cow's lying time is going to look different, and her lying requirements are going to be different. So saying that every cow needs 12 hours of lying time isn't always correct, right? Some cows might require 10 hours, and then others 14. Just depends on the environment she's in, what she's producing, genetics. It's all impacting that. And then another important area that we'll talk about later too is industry, 3 to 5 hours milking time. What we would like to see is about no more than 3.5 hours away from pen per day for milking. My slide isn't working, but I wanted to get the conversation going of what comes to mind when you think about an impact on lying time, or what impacts a lower lying time in dairy cow.
Stall comfort is the biggest thing. You
Yeah.
gotta have big enough stalls, and you gotta be comfortable with beds.
Mm-hmm.
Overcrowding.
Yeah, that's a big one for the Northeast too. So external disruptors, right? So facility design is a big one. Uncomfortable stalls, water access. I was on a farm recently who they were extending the barn kind of piecemeal, right? So the oldest part of the barn was the biggest part, and then they kept adding on more. But as they were adding on more, they would put in a waterer with every 30 stalls. So it was interesting. You couldn't figure out why so many cows were going towards the end of
Section.
the new section. Didn't have brisket board, but also the waters. There was more frequent access to waterers on the new section. So what he's now finding is that cows are all kind of choosing to be on that side of the barn, and it's causing a couple of things: cows to idle around longer and stand and wait for a stall. And also feed shortage at that side of the barn, because that's where cows are opting to be. But it's interesting when we think about why they're choosing to be there. So water access and comfortable stalls is a big one. But there's a lot of other things that impact that. Grouping and competition within the pen, stocking density. That's a conversation we have a lot in the Northeast, particularly. Is what our stocking density looks like, and it's no secret that we like to overstock in the Northeast.
Not just the Northeast, it's everywhere.
But what's interesting with that is it's all farm dependent too. There's some farms that overstock at 130%, and their components are fantastic. Milk production is fantastic. Yeah. But then there's other farms that can't seem to figure it out. It's their breaking point, right? So given your environment, your management style, your access to service, all of that impacts what you're able to do with stocking density. So there's no, if I put my NOVUS hat on, I would say I would love to see you at 100, like you have 100%. Each cow has a stall to go to. But in reality, that's not the case within the industry as we're making milk and it's a business too, right? But the best way to put that is how can we find the sweet spot of cows are getting enough lie time, they're producing what we want them to produce for the business, but they're also having a optimized productive life. Handling heat stress, I'll go a little into that. So why is lying time important for cows? I may start speeding along a little bit here because I'm talking too much, and we gotta get to lunch, but cows are gonna be motivated to lay down about 12 hours per day. And it's a high priority behavior. So if they're away from pen for a long time during the day, they're gonna actually opt, and this is shown in research, that they're gonna opt to lay down over eating and over social activities when they get back to pen. So that's pretty interesting. But again, they need to have access to beds to lay down in, comfortable beds, and the timing of everything needs to be correct as well. But there's a huge link to lameness, right? If cows are standing on concrete, higher chance you're gonna have higher incidence of lameness. And I like to compare this to humans too. When I'm standing on boots with not good arch support all day in a concrete barn, my feet hurt at the end of the day. So that's, cows feel the same way. And then again, each cow has different lying requirements, and it's going to vary by their stage in lactation. We just talked about fresh cows, housing, and actually your region too. I'm going to talk a little bit about bouts and bout duration. So another thing those loggers measure is how many times the cow is laying down and for how long. And why this is important is because you could have a cow that's getting 12 hours of life in a day, but if she's getting up and down X amount of times during the day, she's not getting good quality rest that you want her to get in order to produce, her optimal milk production and components. So this is based on our NOVUS data that we've pulled. 3-row barn is in dark blue, and you might not be able to see it very well, but the 2-row barn information is in gray, but you can see the dotted trend line there. So as stocking density actually increased from 100%, less than 100% to over 50% in 2-row pens, bout duration increased by 12 minutes per bout, and then decreased number of bouts by 1.3 bouts. So just meaning that those cows are laying down for a longer period of time and getting up less. So again, that's where stocking density can sometimes cause an issue of cows getting up and down more, being displaced from stall, or and not having long enough resting time. And lameness can actually reduce the number of bouts too. So if you have a higher incidence of lameness, lame cows will opt to lay down and stay in the bed for longer. So that again, when you're thinking about overstocking in certain groups of cows too, if you've got a lot of lame cows in the pen, they're going to plop down and stay in the pen for longer than a non-lame cow will. So again, just on bout duration, there's some literature that says 20% increase in stall stocking density is associated with bout duration of about, an increase of bout duration by about 2 minutes per bout. 20% decrease in stocking density. And then lame cows, again, had longer bout duration on deep beds than on mattresses. And typical bout duration that we like to see is going to range from 65 to 75 minutes. And we see about an average of 72 minutes per bout, and this is pulled from our NOVUS database. So when we've looked at farms, they're all getting about 72 minutes per bout that cows are laying down for. In the Northeast, we're running about 11 hours on average of lying time, and this is again pulled from NOVUS data. This is an example of a farm actually here in New York that we did an assessment on. It's a really good visualization of what a herd with really good lying time looks like, and is doing things really well to manage it. So between the two red bars, it's 10 hours and 14. And you can see that the majority of those 40 cows that we analyzed are above the 10-hour mark on average over those 3 days that they were assessed. There's only one cow that falls below that, but she's at about a 9-hour average, which is, again, maybe she was in heat, she was up moving around more. So that's the other thing we do when we're on dairies. We do take ID numbers so you can look up and see what was going on those days as well. And then you can see their average bout length and how they compare to their peers here in the Northeast. So about 78 minutes per bout. And then their average lying time was about 12 hours and 58 minutes per day. And it ranged from 9 hours to 14. So they were on the very high end of where they benchmarked among their peers. Now this farm is a good example of a farm that's not reaching potential with their cows. A big conversation here was overstocking. They were really overstocked in the pens we analyzed, and this is what we saw in the end. So you notice that there's very few cows that are even hitting 10 hours of lie time, and then the cows that are hitting the 10 to 14 hours of lie time are on the lower end. So it's interesting. Their bout length is right on average of where we see other farms of their size, but again, their average lying time and their number of bouts was could be improved, right? So definitely a conversation with this farm of, is overstocking hurting you more than it's helping your business when we look at this and milk production and all the other things that are being impacted by the lower amount of lie time here. Just a little economics on lying time, and again, this is hard to give economics. Every farm is different, so you can't make one change and expect to see an immediate, 2 pounds of milk per cow in the bulk tank. But based on literature, every extra hour of lie time means about 2.4 pounds of milk per day. And then based on our NOVUS data, actually, that's 2 to 4 pounds of milk extra per hour of lying and time. That includes Western U.S. data, though. If we look at just the Northeast, I wrote it down. I'm gonna say, I can't see where I wrote it down, but regardless, that is over 5 pounds of milk will be found in the Northeast based on data we collected, including Western U.S. kind of brought that number down. And then importance time of lying time and early lactation is pretty interesting. We talked about how at risk those cows are for lameness issues in that fresh period, especially coming out of dry, close-up dry pens and into lactation and really needing to spend more time at the feed bunk and adjusting. And we find that each additional hour of lying time in fresh pen equates to about 5 more pounds of milk per day. And this is, again, based on our NOVUS data that we collected on lying time in fresh pens and then correlated with milk production on the farm. Lying time does decrease overall with stocking density, and I'll skip over this a little bit because I don't want to focus too long on it, but and that can be inferred, right? If there's competition for beds, there's going to be a decrease in lying time. It's just, it's inferred. But again, depends on the farm and depends on what those cows' requirements are for lie time. A little bit on the effects of overstocking at stalls. Again, reduced lying time and reduced latency to lay down and after return from the parlor. So, and I've seen this happen, and it was a farm recently. I kind of observed as cows were coming back from the parlor, what I noticed was a lot of lame cows tend to be at the back of the pen when they go to the parlor. So those cows are going to the parlor last. They're likely laying down. They're the last ones to get up to go to parlor. They're the last ones to come back. And once they get back to the pen, feed bunk is sometimes full. Or it's full at the front, so that lame cow is going to have to walk all the way down to the end of the pen to access a free head stall or free headlock to eat. So but she's tired because she's been standing for so long waiting in the holding area that she's just going to opt to choose an empty bed and relax. So a couple issues there, right? Like her teat ends are probably still open and she's going to go lay right down, which is really not what we want right away. But also too, she's not getting up and getting all of the nutrients at the feed bunk after feed has been delivered as well. So it's an interesting thing to watch happen, and an interesting hurdle to kind of handle. This farm that I was at recently, they weren't doing what I call double roundup. I don't know if that's a term actually or not. Jeff makes fun of me for that, but so they were taking the whole pen all at once, and they had a lot of lame cows in that pen because it was pen closest to the parlor. It was also overstocked because they're growing. And so now after our discussion there, what they're doing now is they're closing off half the pen, taking half those cows, cleaning that half of the pen, and then they start pushing the second half. Now, not all farms can make that work because it depends on your return alleys and your setup and all of that. But if you can, and you have a larger pen, that's a good way to get cows to lay down for longer. And then when they aren't as tired then when they get back too, because they're not on their feet as long. So, yeah. And then again, just reduce number of bouts by about 0.1 bouts and increase bout duration by about 48 minutes with each 10% increase in stocking density. So as stall stocking density increases, lying bouts tends to decrease. And then reduce lying time by about 5 minutes per day with 10% increase in stocking density. And this is based on data we collected. Getting into a little bit, do I still have time or do you want to?
Yeah,
okay. I'll spend a little bit of time on 10 away from pen. This is one that I think sometimes we forget to pay attention to. I've been on a few dairies where I do my timer for 10 away from pen, and we count that as when the first cow leaves to when the last cow comes back to the pen, because that's the highest and greatest amount of time that a cow can possibly be away from pen during the day. And then multiply by the number of times milking. In the Northeast, we're averaging about 4 hours and 32 minutes away from pen. So it's kind of interesting to look at. We'd like to see that number to be closer to 3.5 hours away from pen or less. Just again, to not cut into the cow's time budget of all the other things she's got to do throughout the day, which we want to include 12 to 14 hours of rest time too.
I have a question on that side.
Yeah.
Is it, like looking at Canada being way lower, is it just because they're just smaller dairies, so it's quicker for them to move through all there?
Yeah, and I think,
Their parlors are oversized.
yeah.
Well, they don't overcrowd it, so.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they're
So-
just doing it better.
So you can see like all the US is much greater, much higher than Canada, and that's, parlor size and farm size too probably feeds into that, and stocking density as well.
Southwest, way better than us.
Southwest, 3.5. That's a good question, and I don't know. I can ask that and get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or what are they?
yeah, it's measured the same in the Southwest. I want to say probably bigger parlors is part of that too. They're just moving cows through quicker than we do here. I think of some of the farms I've been on here, and we're trying to grow, a lot of farms are, and they're trying to move the same number of cows, or more cows through the same size parlor that they had 10, 20 years ago, right? My fiance's herd does that, right? It's they're working with what they had, but they've grown in numbers, so they're moving more cows through, optimizing what they have. So I think for Southwest, it's probably a little bit newer facilities and probably bigger parlors is the answer there. But I could get more info.
I was just curious because
Yeah.
that is meeting the goal that you said.
Mhm.
They're more spread out.
And then effects from time away from pen. So higher lane resistance, you've got cows standing on concrete for longer. I've actually seen a lot of farms recently that are put in rubber and holding areas and in parlor, which is great. Allows the cows to have kind of a break while they're standing there. But yeah, more time standing, reducing their line time and reduce production. So when time away, this is was from Dr. Rick Grant. So when time away from pen was reduced from 6 hours to 3 hours per day, this is what we saw in milk response and in rest response in heifers and cows. So it's interesting, and that's in pounds of milk per day, the response seen. Other factors to consider that affect time budgets are time spent in lockup. So how many times are cows being locked up during a day? So lame cows, So lameness is 12% higher in the last 1/3 of the cow's milk compared to the first third, which is what we kind of just talked about when we're taking cows to the parlor and returning from parlor. Stocking density, and then heat abatement. You know, what's happening inside and outside of the pen that could impact line time and time budgets. Just briefly touching on some effects of heat stress, but mainly what I want to focus on today is the effect on lameness and laminitis. So when cows are in heat stress, there's a increase in claw horn lesions that we've seen, and development in late summer, and that's associated with the increase in total standing time per day. So kind of all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, right, when we're talking about lameness and prevention on farm and all the factors that are impacting it and how they interconnect. A lot of times on herds recently that I've looked at, you know, wind speed from the fans can look okay, but once you get down at the cow level of where they're laying down, and those animals are hot, just in general, but when they start breathing on each other, when they're laying down in double stalls specifically, and laying next to each other, that increases temperature a whole lot. And so to think about that during the summer, cows will often wait to be able to be in a stall that doesn't have a partner right next to it, or doesn't have someone across from them. So that's, you know, where we get some of that decrease in lie time as well. For each increase of THI by 10 units, there was a loss of about 3 hours of lying time per day, which equates to a loss of about 9 pounds of milk per day. So kind of an interesting thing to think about. And again, you know, as we're moving into, we're not in heat stress right now, but as we're moving into that, something to think about, how you're managing that within your herd, or when you're seeing lameness numbers creep up, you know, what's going on management wise, that could be impacting that. I really like showing this photo. It's a very pretty location on a dry lot herd, but I like to ask people what they notice about this picture.
Sunshine.
Yeah, that'd be nice, right? Okay, so in terms of locked up, all these cows are locked. Not one of them is eating. So they've been standing here for a long time. And I like looking at that, and I like showing this because it really demonstrates, it's a big pen, right? And I don't know if they were doing herd check or waiting to give shots or whatever they were doing that day, but whatever it was, these cows have been here for so long that they just are opting not to eat. And or they might be hot as well because they're standing in direct sun, and so no one wants to eat when they're hot either. So to me, that's telling me, so there's hours wasted in the day, minutes wasted in the day of time where these cows are doing nothing but standing. They aren't socializing, they aren't eating, they aren't drinking, and they aren't laying down. So I like to show this because it's something to think about when you're on your own herds that you're trimming for, or on your herds at home, when you think about how many times you're locking, for how long, and you know, the impact that has on the cow's day. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but you know, again, when cows come back, if the cows that are lame are going to return probably last, they're going to face more competition at the feed bunk when they return last, to find space, and face competition to then lie down after they visit the feed bunk. This is a picture of a cow that was probably, I would classified her as a 4, because she's not holding weight on one of her legs, and she couldn't find a spot to lie down. She returned from the parlor late, visited the feed bunk, and then by that time, most of the non-lame cows had already picked beds to lay down in and were laying down. So something to think about too when you're grouping and handling lame cows. You know, do you have a certain pen to move lame cows to, or how do you manage that treatment process on the farm? So that is what I had. Sorry I kind of rushed through it there, but I wanted us to be able to get to lunch. Does anyone have any questions for me? Again, if you're interested in diving or seeing more NOVUS specific data, we can pull that or show it to you. Happy to do that. And also happy to share any of the papers that were referenced in the conversation today as well, if you're interested. But anyone have any questions?
Yes, I do have one question. So for the herds that you do go and work with, are you visiting them multiple times and kind of
Yeah.
seeing how it changes over time for them, like with changes that you're implementing on farms? Or?
Yeah, so we have farms that have gone through, so like the first graph that I showed of one of the herds in the Northeast that had really good lying time distribution, they have had 3 assessments. Jeff might know better than I do because I'm a little newer to NOVUS, but I believe in the past they've had 3 or 4 assessments. So sometimes once people do one, they want us to come back maybe a year later or 2 years later and reassess to track progress. I have one herd that wants us to just simply come and lameness score. So we've helped them develop, they mostly develop the plan, but we are supporting it of figuring out how they better manage lameness, and then we're going to come out every year at the same time and rescore to manage and see if the changes they've made are helping. But typically we'll do the assessment, come back about a month later with the results, and sit down with the dairyman, hoof trimmer if they're available, veterinarian, nutritionist, and review the information, suggest changes, but really let the dairy team, management team drive the changes based on the information we give back. And then from there, Jeff is usually the first one to hear about positive changes or things that have happened on the dairy, either from the nutritionist or other key players on the dairy. So sometimes they communicate back to us and let us know what they've done, sometimes not. But most of the time there is some sort of follow-up on our end of providing either more information or more service. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would NOVUS and farms that work with NOVUS or post-protection, they be open to collaborating with Extension when it comes to those dairy modernization grants? I've helped farms write
Yeah.
many of those over the last couple of years, and the grants always want a metric to be delivered after. Would NOVUS be an
Yeah.
appropriate contact for a pre-evaluation? And then say where, for example, I wrote one to dig out deeply bettered paver stalls to put in mattresses, which is not ideal,
you're
but a
Talking
before,
like a pre-evaluation and
pre-evaluation,
then
then
post.
they do the project, and it's one of their grant deliverables to make their application stronger, because they're claiming I need better cow comfort, I need better
The
whatever.
only perfect fit.
Or same for ventilation.
I think the only thing we would need to make sure of is that we typically only do assessments just because it's such a big spend of our time and dollars on farms that are using our product. So that would be a question for the sales team and the nutritionists on the farm, because we always want to loop in your nutritionist and other key players on the farm. So yes, but we could follow up on that. Yeah.
I think that would be helpful to farms who are saying I need new fans, I need new stalls, and so we have to tell this big story for the grant.
Yeah.
And if we've got
We could even
pre-assessment,
provide literature too that we have on file that shows for certain
and
things.
the deliverable at the end could be after we put in this new ventilation system, now my cows are laying down more.
Yeah.
We have better lying.
There has been talk too along those lines as well of monitoring change that I'm kind of working on is, farms that experience farm program, which is everybody's favorite thing. If they get put on a continuous improvement plan with farm program, how can we help them develop a system or a program for that, but also track their progress so that they can get off the CIP? There's like a fire call or something. It's a new bell. But yeah, in addition to that, there's certain. I come from a dairy food background, my most recent role. So even helping dairy food processors who have higher lists of requirements, to give the farm a baseline and then come back and track what progress has been made. That's something we've talked about doing too with some farms. So yeah, open to discussion. If anyone's interested in this program, open to discussion, and reach out to Jeff or myself. So.